under attack, swamped by barbarians who hate freedom, the rule of law, and every value on which civilization is built upon. I'm not just talking about illegal immigration from all kinds of hellholes across the globe. The particular savages I refer to are homegrown supporters of hate and terror. They hide in our institutions and carry out their nefarious activities unchecked. You can change a prime minister, a governor, a president, but no election will ever get rid of these poisonous barnacles. Those in charge of education young adults are the worst. These parasites abuse their taxpayer-funded position of authority to poison young minds with irrational, deadly ideas. We have seen them in action in campus all across the world in the last few months. They hide in plain sight behind the job title of professor of some obscure made-up bullshit subject. But the lowest of the low are the cowards hiding in schools abusing young children's minds.
Welcome to the reality show. We're joined today by Daniel and Michael Kaufman. Thank you for joining us, gents. And we're discussing this recent article by the Free Press about schools. We're talking about the K-12 education system. Now, for anyone who's not American, I didn't know this earlier today, this particular term, but the K comes from kindergarten, the 12 from 12th grade. So we're talking about the range of education from like 5 to 6-year-olds to 17 to 18-year-olds. We're talking about elementary, middle, and high school, essentially, and the teaching that takes place there. And of course, we're talking, this particular article was exposing the Los Angeles Teaching Union and the methods by which and the activism by which they use within those schools. So perhaps I might come to you, Michael, first, as you are American, to talk about, what you think about this notion of activism for adolescents and school teachers seeing their job in that way, and whether schools have become a sort of pre-training ground for the campus intifada.
Yeah, well, one of the things you see growing in America, and I don't know about other countries, but this consistent theme of activism across a whole slew of far left-wing, crazy progressive politics, including telling first and second graders that their sex is not real and that it's a continuum, and that if they want to switch tomorrow, they can. They teach them that criminals who steal things are not bad people; they're victims of the horrible capitalism that exists in America, and they continue it with great consistency, almost no matter where they are, with that Israel is an evil empire that has taken over the poor Palestinians, et cetera, and they walk around in these keffiyehs and all. What they don't do is they don't teach 9/11, they don't teach the Holocaust, they blame America for World War II in the use of atomic bombs and so on. I wasn't aware of this specific situation, but I am not at all surprised. What I think we all have to remember, what Ayn Rand teaches us, is that everything that happens stems from a philosophy or lack thereof. But this is a philosophy. There is a very dark and evil philosophy here, which is essentially anti-meritocracy, anti-success, and therefore anti-Jewish, that blames anybody who has done well, countries that have done well, and pits oppressors against the oppressed, including America. And so I wasn't the least bit surprised. What is shocking but no longer surprising, particularly in California, is the fact that multiple laws are violated. Clearly this stuff is, they even say it in the article, clearly these teachers know how to get around some of this, but the outcomes are the same. And the leaders, the so-called leaders, have done nothing to stop it. Nothing.
Yeah. Daniel, you are in a different country altogether. How are things your way?
Well, when I was in primary school, like 2 years ago or so, I think I had one friend talk to me about the American education, and I definitely think Slovakia has not yet been invaded by progressive education, and I don't think we will be for a while. But I think there is something that we've talked about on the production meeting, is generally the sort of like the proper way, specifically now to teach history, because we'll go to a clip later and they've been talking about specifically teaching history. But I think something that James has said there, I think was very important. You can't teach history with no values. You can't just, sort of just spew the facts out and, expect something will stick. So there have to be some values that inform your either your education model, the way what you'll be teaching about, what do you think are the most important lessons from history, or something to look at. And generally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the problems with public education, but I don't think that's even the main issue, because we've seen the similar thing in universities, in private universities, is that basically in the West we have given up on Western values. We have, or not even Western values, but in moral confidence in Western values. Basically, the new line is basically all cultures are equal. There are no better cultures. There are no better systems of governments. There are just different people trying different things, and they are supposed to be all equal. And when you have this sort of egalitarian view of history, those are the values you are uphold. Then when you do that, of course, there's no difference. What's the difference between Hamas and the Israeli government? There is none really, because you don't have any values that can inform the decision. So I think that's something that's very problematic when it comes to sort of the, I guess, the more modern education, is that we are lacking any values that would inform our education system. And while I think public education has definitely made this process deteriorate much faster than I think we would see if the education was fully privatized. At the end of the day, I think it will be a problem even when it comes to private education, because the fundamental ideas behind it are so opposing to rational societies.
Yeah, yeah. And as you mentioned, this lack of confidence on the morality of the West, on the validity of freedom as a requirement for people to live a fulfilling, happy, productive life, it's kind of been abandoned in the last few years. And the vacuum has been filled very quickly by stupid ideas like the BLM stuff, making you believe that the color of your skin determines in any way what you should think or how you should behave, which is pure racism. The pigmentation kind of racism. And then that having been proven stupid, like the Marxist idea upon which it was based, we had the gender stuff. They make believe that you can, as Michael mentioned, change your sex like they wear clothes. And then even this, having proven ridiculous beyond redemption, really, we've seen creeping in this anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian narrative. And bearing in mind that Palestine is a made-up country and Palestinians are made-up people from a country that doesn't exist, who have automatically the unchallenged status of victims. So because they're victims, then therefore they must be right. It's so even beyond discussion whether the Palestinians are victims or actually are the perpetrator of the horrors that we've been seeing in the last few months, a year. So where does this idea come from? Who fills the void that the West leaves? And that would be quite an interesting way of seeing where do these ideas come from.
I think one of the things I've noticed is, particularly in doing these kind of shows, is that is the links between different subjects that you see, the integrations you see between totally different subjects that exist. And yesterday we were doing a show on the Daily Objective about the new leader of the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch. And in the course of researching for that, I read something she'd written about what she called the authoritarian progressives. And that is exactly what we're talking about here. And she recounted an anecdote where, as she was talking as she's a black woman, she was giving a speech about how we're beyond racism now because people like her are in good positions of power, etc., and how there were people in the audience, a group of white women who were tutting and rolling their eyes through it. And she went up and spoke to them afterwards to try and understand why their reaction was such. And she said it was quite interesting to see what they said. One of them said, "It's because I need to feel a part of something important." She talked about Kemi talked about them being warriors for the understanding of social justice, crusaders in a movement that provides meaning and security for them. And I think that's part of it, is the meaning and security beyond themselves, because they are having the individual, airbrushed out of existence, and the group is everything. They are seeing themselves having meaning beyond their own lives. And I think that's certainly a big part of it. And one of the phrases she uses in the article, which struck me, was political activism masquerading as ethical campaigning. And that's exactly what this is here, isn't it? And that's exactly what's taking place with these young minds. And what we're talking about here in this particular episode is the Free Press have exposed a teacher union doing various conferences and things and teaching other teachers how to get past the laws, how to work their activism in the least manner least likely to have them fired, because obviously they do care about their salary, and yet also it shows the pernicious way in which they're trying to force their ideas upon young minds, not teach them how to think, but exactly what to think, and that there is only one narrative that they can think. So perhaps it might be useful to show the clip at this point, I think, just to give a feel for this, if that's okay. So this is one of the people who is a union member. The union we're talking about here is it's an LA union called the United Teachers of Los Angeles. I think it's got about 35,000 members apparently. But one of these is a union member, and he's talking about this particular subject and in terms of Palestine and Israel.
And we know that good history education is political education, right? And when we are coming up against political movements, like the movement for Zionism that we disagree with, that we're in conflict with, they have their own form of political education, and they employ their own tools of censorship. So it's incumbent on us to be talking with each other and building that political education and making a comfortable, safe home for having these discussions, which I think we've been able to build in LA Educators for Justice in Palestine. And it's paid off to the point where we have a group of nearly 300 people now in UTLA. And I would just emphasize, we are reading articles, we're getting wonderful news updates, we're sharing stuff in the chat, but we went to marches, we went to the encampments at college campuses all over the city. We went and spoke to people directly involved in the fight, and that is some of the best political education that you can possibly have.
Thank you.
So there we have it. So Michael, what was your reaction to seeing that particular clip and the context of this article that is exposing some detail about how this takes place?
Well, the first thing is that taxpayers are funding this idiot. That's number one, which means, and let me be blunt, because we should all be very clear about what it means to pay taxes. If you don't pay taxes, you go to jail. So essentially, someone has a gun to your head to pay taxes. Now, the reason we started to pay taxes was to form a government that would protect us, because the essence of any government is that it has to protect its citizens. So you give up some things in order to receive protection from the government. And that's the great agreement between citizens and their government. That's how it all starts. This man has completely co-opted that fundamental agreement. He has said that you're going to pay my taxes so that I can stand up and make a political decision that I'm going to support a group of essentially terrorists. By the way, the country that I'm getting paid taxes in the public schools that I'm teaching in, have declared this organization a terrorist organization. That is, Hamas is a terrorist organization in America, according to America. And I'm going to take your tax money essentially at gunpoint, because that's what it really means. And I'm going to use it to teach people that Hamas is good. Now, the reason I make such an important black and white comment like this is because we need to stop with the moral relativism that Barack Obama made so very popular in America. And it all comes from this lack of a belief, as you guys said, especially Richard said, this lack of the I, or actually Marco, I think you were saying, I is being erased because liberty is no longer important. Somehow there's this notion of the group good. And until we all have a collective mind like the Borg do on Star Trek, where there's no such thing, it's baloney. And if I get shot, I feel pain. Nobody next to me feels pain. They might be upset, they might be emotionally upset, but they don't feel actual neurological pain. And that's a medical fact, by the way, for those of you that want to start with the psychological pain and all that stuff. So the point being that we need to stop with this sort of, it's not sort of okay what he's doing. It is blackmail at gunpoint. And he is making the statement that I am going to co-opt the system while it's paying me in order to teach kids how to kill, ultimately kill Jews. And if we're not going to kill them, we're going to run them out of our society. All in favor of an organization which has been declared a terrorist organization by my country. And the reason I'm allowed to do that is because I'm morally correct. Now, when we put it in those terms, I think it makes the situation a lot clearer. This man needs to be arrested. He needs to be put on civil trial. As far as I'm aware, he didn't physically hurt anybody, but he did teach terrorist support. There are laws in America that say you are not allowed to suborn and support terrorists. There are also laws that say you cannot yell fire in a crowded room when there is no fire, and you can go to jail for that. And this is the same kind of thing. But the other side of this is that we can no longer rely on our government in America, especially in California and Massachusetts and most blue states, to actually prosecute these people. But where are all the lawyers? And to be a little bit cynical, where are all the Jewish lawyers here? Why are there not massive lawsuits? Not one or two, or we're doing something about it, or we're talking about it. Where are they? These kids are being taught the same crap that the kids in Gaza are being taught about how to hate Jews. It's the same playbook. Those are my thoughts. I don't understand why the Jewish organizations in America and anybody who supports Israel and anybody who supports Western thought, whether you're Jewish or not, do not come after these people.
Yeah.
Beyond me.
Yeah, it's probably relevant to point out that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has imposed as a condition for graduating school the learning of ethnic studies, which is just an excuse to show how white people, how Western society is actually oppressing everybody else. Everybody else is automatically right. Every other group is always the victim at the receiving end of the oppression from the white Western people, which is, ultimately weaponized as well against Israel, so much so that the curriculum was actually proven to be anti-Semitic, and it was slightly tweaked, or there was all sorts of shenanigans going on about it. But then you heard this genius talk in this clip. How do you think he should be responded to, really?
I'm wondering where do I want to take this, because something that's something that I found interesting. Well, first of all, I just want to quickly let's just assume this is private education, because I want to talk more about the things he said rather than the fact that this is taxpayers' money that's being used in a certain way. Let's assume this was like a private institution, and he called for this basically. And when I was in my school, we had like civics 101, basically, sort of just a general general ideas about the political structure we are living in, and sort of just the general information. And when I'm thinking about sort of like teaching history and teaching let's say civics, I think it would be crazy to think it should be done basically just this sort of like colorblind way. Basically, oh, we don't know what's the right system. I mean, we don't teach any subjects like that. We don't teach science in the way, well, some people have these ideas about what is the proper science, some people have this idea about proper science. No, generally, I mean, the most important thing that kids should learn is the process of how to think. But even when it comes to particulars, you don't just teach random things and let them decide what is the right thing. So in some aspect, I would agree that some in a sense political education, and what I mean by that, acknowledgement that the liberal democracies, the Western type of government we have, is the best thing we have right now. And sort of trying to teach history or politics in the way that, well, we don't know if the American Revolution was better or French Revolution was better. It's just different kind of revolutions. We've tried different things. So that's why I think, in a sense, there is like a small thing that I kind of like about it, but the way they take it is the absolute opposite direction, which I think is the real problematic part. It's the actually recognizing what is the good and choosing the opposite. Like actually, like it's very hard to pick more evil side than Hamas, than even generally the Palestinian, because again, there's nothing necessarily wrong about learning the history of the region, the history of different groups around the time, but again, taking it as these are just some people who are resisting some group, and we should learn about them, and it should be automatically something good, rather than actually trying to find what is truth, what is the actual thing we should focus on. I don't know, maybe I'm all over the place, but if you can pick out something from that we can more talk about.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to be all over the place with these people, isn't it? Because I like to think, take that guy, he's a fairly young guy, yeah? What motivates him to wake up in the morning and go to a place and start teaching activism, not even teaching activism, but effectively indoctrinating kids who are just blank slate in front of him, and he effectively behaves like a I don't know, a missionary trying to create the content of these young minds, shape it to whatever vision of the world he has. And just look at the guy. You shouldn't judge somebody by the looks of it, but just look at what he's wearing, what he's chosen to wear, the way he's presenting himself. First of all, he has this jihadi towel around his neck. By that, he's stating, I stand with Hamas. I stand with Palestinian and everything that they represent. All the evil and the hate and the missiles and the murders and the slaughters that they represent, I condone it. That's the first statement he makes. And then he's covered in badges. And later on, he makes the point of, he's so proud that he's got this badge, I stand with Palestine, or some crap like that. And the other badge is probably LGBT, the letter people, the alphabet people. And this kind of person is the typical racist, not they necessarily focus on the color of the skin, but racist in the sense that he sees somebody else wearing the same colors of his team, and he finds himself, he finds himself safe. He feels he's in safe company. He feels he can express himself because his tiny brain cannot process anything different from, he belongs to my group, therefore I can be myself. I am part of the group. I have an identity, because he doesn't have any self-esteem. He doesn't have anything that defines who he is and what he does. And therefore, he has to abrogate his thinking to a group that tells him, wear this. If you look like this, you are the right person, you're a good person. And that's part of the stuff that we really have to push against. Michael was saying, why on earth we haven't got people taking these kind of activists to task? Well, why on earth parents stand up to this kind of crap? You're sending your kids to the slaughter.
And I think
I'm sorry to jump in. I just want to amplify real quick, Marco. What you said is he doesn't have any self-esteem, and I would be willing to bet that 99 out of 100 of these kinds of people, including all the people that jump up and down and talk about free Palestine and globalize the Intifada, have never created anything in their life. They've never built anything in their life. They have no self-esteem because there's no self there. There's nothing that they can point to and said, I did this. And the only thing they're left with is to tear down what other people have done. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was worth amplifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just on that point about all the badges he's wearing and everything, all of those symbols, the symbols is part of the activism cult, isn't it? It's forcing you to pick a tribe and to demonstrate it through the symbols. And, that's the form of conformity that they're trying to press. And it's the same with, social media and the emojis that you're encouraged to add to your profile on any given month, on any given issue for the duration, or to change your picture to suit whatever is the, the stay in the safety of the crowd consensus at any given time. You see that all the time. And of course, within the teaching of activism to young minds, you see it really quite at a young age. When certainly in the UK, when things like they run United Nation days where all the kids pretend to be a particular country, and of course nobody wants to be Israel in such a setting because they don't want to be ostracized or shouted at by the rest of the class, which is sometimes what happens. And of course other things which is at a more basic level of being taught. Let's all make banners, let's all make signs, let's all make protest signs today. Let's all do flags, all that kind of stuff. That can start at quite a young age, where street protest and agitation is the lesson that's being taught as agitating for political change, as a form of, instead of thinking. It's all about the perceptual level stuff, isn't it? But I did want to just cover a couple of the super chats we've got. We've got two from Jonathan Honig. The first said, thank you very much, Jonathan. Marco, Richard and Michael all had great questions for Dr. Peikoff on the election, and it was fun to see them interact. Congrats to them and to ARCUK for bringing this to the world. Thank you, Jonathan. And on your second one, he said, all-star team today. Great shoe, gents. Thank you very much. And also to Crusader General, who's also given us a super chat, who says, if they can convince the common useful idiot that a man can become a woman, then naturally Islam is a religion of peace and Jews are genociding Palestinians. Follows on from that. It's called a subversion. Bezmenov said it best. I confess I don't know who Bezmenov is, but I certainly concur with the rest of what you've quoted there. So yeah, thank you very much for your super chat. We appreciate it.
I tried Googling. Yuri Bezmenov is a Soviet journalist. Funny enough, Bezmenov means without a name in Russian. So it's actually kind of interesting name. Something I wanted to talk about, something that really sort of scares me, and that might be specifically from sort of history of my country, is that pretty much most revolutions have actually been started by students. When it comes to the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, that was basically, that escalated because a student sort of protest was suppressed, and from that came out the full-on basically revolution that overthrew the actual regime. And students basically have been always, and I think generally around the world, students are the sort of the political activists, the sort of idealists who will push for change when things start going in a way they don't want. And when students become sort of accept this ideology, and I guess we've seen it with the campus intifada, which we've called, students had a problem with something and they are the ones speaking out. And it showed what has happened to the education. This is what they speak about, not about the Israel getting attacked by a terrorist organization. They are protesting Israel defending itself against a terrorist organization. That's where it led to, and that's what sort of fills me with a certain amount of fear. The fact that this is the, in a sense, the revolutionary class sort of we have right now. It's people who are against the West, people who are against Western values, people who stand for the destruction of West as it currently stands. And that's scary, because once you have that, once you're sort of like the people who are supposed to normally speak out against injustice, when they do the opposite, who is going to be there to speak out against those people? You don't really have anything after that.
Yeah.
Well, let's remember that. Let's remember, first of all, that if they're telling Israel to get out of the occupied lands, that they're the occupiers, they also list, I think there was a diagram they had in one of the pre-reads, if you will, this North America. I mean, we took a lot of the US land from the Indians. Hey, folks, that's how it works. You know, that's the history of humanity, and pretending that we can go back in time and roll it back and apply today's values to something that happened 200-300 years ago is obviously fantasy land. But again, when somebody is talking about, I stand for my own destruction. I want Israel out of Palestine because they occupied the area. I want the US out of North America because we took it over from the American Indians or the Native Americans. It's the same thing. And you should never stand with someone who is in favor of their own destruction. And they're consistent across the board with this. Again, the philosophy fits so beautifully together. It's the gaze for Palestine. What kind of a moron is in favor of a philosophy that will slaughter them? Women for Palestine. What kind of a set of idiots would be in favor of a philosophy that subjugates them? All the women's rights that got them into colleges in America and the Western world, all the things they fought for to vote and so on and so forth, don't exist in the world that they are supporting. And that's how sick this is. Now, normally the adults would have come in and explained to them that you people are completely contradicting yourselves and you're hypocritical. But because, like you all said, the West no longer stands up not only for themselves, but for even rationality. We don't have leaders that stand up for rationality. We have leaders that say it's good to have homeless people pooping all over the streets and shooting up and leaving needles. That's what Gavin Newsom says. He doesn't do anything about it unless the president of China comes to California. So let's be clear about the underlying philosophy and how broken. It is the irrationality, it is chaos, it is love for destruction, it is love for failure, anti-meritocracy. It's consistent across the board. Israel is too damn successful. It's a blight on the misery that goes on in the Arab countries surrounding it, because it shows them that it could be done in the middle of the desert with no oil reserves.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to quickly say, so it's not taken wrongly. There is a certain amount of discussion I think you could have about what happened under colonialism. But, taking that and saying that the justice would be to basically cleanse all people from basically almost everyone from North and South America. It's all the people who came in, that this sort of would make it more just, or sort of would like be an actual solution to anything, is I think what's really the ridiculous part. The fact that injustices happen in the past, and to fix them is commit injustice against people who have nothing with it. No one was alive at the time. It's all all people are born a blank slate. You don't get the sins of your forefathers or the virtues of your forefathers just because you were born in a certain location. Sort of the way it's been it's used, that it's clearly showing that the only sort of just resolution would be to put down the actual good things about the West. That's what I find really problematic.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a kind of ideas that they really come from collectivism, doesn't it? I mean, they ignore the fact that humankind was born in Africa in the first place, and from there we spread out in the world. I mean, the people who were in Northern America or Southern America when Europeans arrived in the 1500s, I mean, they came from Asia in the first place. So they probably displaced something else or somebody else. So how far back do we go? It's a kind
Well, they technically didn't displace anyone because no one was there before. As you said, people came from one place in Africa, basically, and then moved all over the place.
Well, yeah, there's evidence that the Homo sapiens displaced Australopithecus and the other people, so the other species that were around.
That's actually true. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were alive at the same time.
So, I mean, we don't have evidence to prove either way, but the bottom line is that the arbitrary choice of a certain time scale or a certain position or a certain area of the world is as I said, arbitrary. So you cannot make a statement from that point onwards. And the fact that the hallmarks of all these movements is ultimately anti-capitalism. We've seen from Greta as a great evolution from saving the planet to saving the Palestinian to destroy capitalism. It's so a coincidence that what we're talking about now comes from a union, a labor union, a lefty institution. It's not a coincidence that every march we see here in London, pro-Hamas, so-called pro-Palestinians, are always sponsored, or most of the placards are from the Socialist Worker, which is a publication which says exactly what it says, a socialist push.
I think we've had the unpleasant experience of watching the full session of this particular set of unions, and they said quite a few things in it which are quite telling. First of all, they talked about the nature of what a union is, and described it as fighting our boss as being their primary purpose. Now that's an interesting form of formulation for a start, isn't it? You're not trying to fight for the people within the firm. You're actively against your boss as your motivation. And I think there were a number of stuff that they mentioned within the course of this that was interesting. They talked about motivating teachers, and especially young teachers, because they clearly recognize that the most malleable, susceptible to this social justice is, of course, the younger minds who've been indoctrinated with this identity politics. And one of them said at one point, social justice is our bread and butter as a union. And of course, that shows what an activist thing it is. And of course, the advice given to get round the law, for example, advising teachers within the room not to drive their students to an anti-Israel protest, but to just happen to turn up at an anti-Israel protest where they both are. So you go, oh, I didn't know I was going to run into you here, so that you're not going to lose your job for actually. But of course, to mention that protest repeatedly in class, to remind students of the date, to encourage them to go, to talk about all of the issues. And I think one of the things that the article also highlighted, with lots of anecdotal evidence and lots of from all sorts of schools across Los Angeles, was the different kind of things taught in class and the effect it has on class relations for Jewish students within the classroom, and the amount of bullying that then is essentially legitimized by what the teacher says within the classroom. And that seemed to lead to teachers taking down hostage posters within American classrooms, for one example. And so I don't know whether you saw the full article, Michael, but some of the teaching within there it didn't seem that different from UNRWA teaching in terms of some of the examples of pie charts and physics questions. What are your thoughts on that aspect?
Well, I think it's a wonderful story. You're right. More people died. By that account, we should show the Americans that died in World War II versus the Japanese, and we should say the Americans are bad. That's a great way to teach people what's right and what's wrong. It's all a numbers game. So if you're incompetent and stupid, and you fight a power that's stronger than you, you're right. But that's consistently what they say. Nobody should be surprised about this. I strongly believe that adults that have risen to this or fallen to this position in life are lost. I don't know how you fix adults except to make sure they have real consequences of their views, because these people are sitting in a country that defends their right to be contradictory and hypocritical, and unfortunately currently is defending their right to ruin our next generation, and will cause them to hate themselves, meaning the next generation will not have self-esteem either. But the kids we have to do something about. Absolutely. And we're not protecting them. We're not protecting them from this stupidity. My last point, I have two boys that are 25 and 21, and I have a 9-year-old daughter. The 25 and 21-year-old have a lot of friends that grew up mostly Jewish, not all of them, but they grew up under this increasingly absurd set of teachings, which are mixed in with DEI and critical race theory and oppressed and oppressors and all this kind of stuff. And many of them have no self-esteem. Many of them just walk around with some mystical guilt. They feel bad about everything. You know, a cat gets squashed in the road and they feel bad about it. There's no person there. It's just a miserable wretch. And I don't know how they're going to get through their lives with any kind of happiness. And I don't know how they're going to give their kids any kind of happiness. It's like they're living in the Soviet Union, which is exactly the goal of the people that we're seeing. This notion of there are three things: reason, purpose, and self-esteem. This man throws reason on its head. He gives pie charts that talk about the numbers of dead, which has nothing to do with anything. He has no self-esteem, and his only purpose is chaos, misery and chaos. Anti-capitalism leads to starvation. Show me a successful anti-capitalist group in the world. They don't exist. That, to me, at the point of 9 billion humans, that's good enough for me in terms of a social experiment. We have not been able to come up with a better regimen. Maybe we will someday, but right now capitalism is the one that has produced flourishing and allowed self-esteem and reason and purpose. So that's how I feel about the whole thing. I think the fact that the adults are letting the criminals run the world now, or at least be the voice, is a disgrace, and it is incumbent upon people like us on this show and others to stand up and start to call. I think we have to do it definitively, though, guys. I don't think we can, and we do on this show. We're very, very clear. But most people are still too afraid to say, I'm right and you're wrong. And I don't know why, because we have history on our side. Clearly, not even a little bit on our side. It's completely on our side.
Yeah, totally. And it kind of made me laugh when the guy said, talked about bread and butter, because if you have people like him, there wouldn't be any bread and certainly not any butter, because they would feel too guilty about oppressing a cow and getting the milk out of it. So these people use words like rights, human rights, to an extent that they don't even know what they're talking about.
Or alternatively, with the communist thinking that he's pushing, it would be there'd be no bread and butter because there'd be no success at all in the first place. I think if schools are a training for the workplace, then you can see that this is sadly a training for the workplace, because in this world of DEI and awareness days where you need to confess your privilege or self-flagellate for the sins of your forefathers, this is the practice for that, sadly. So it is clearly a cultural thing that works right across the board, and it has already infiltrated private workplaces all over the shop already. And that's a sad reflection of how quickly people imitate without considering the consequences of what it is they're imitating. And even within the private schools, because many parents who send children to private schools are also the super left end of the spectrum and suck this stuff up, they're also happy to foster it within the private schools. So the fact that it's taxpayer funded or not is not necessarily the issue. It's the broader culture at play. But I do want to get to some of the super chats because we had a few and we definitely want to cover them. So Crusader General, who was clarifying what he said earlier about Yuri Bezmenov, who was a former KGB agent and defector, he says, who explains how a nation can be conquered without firing a single bullet. His interviews are on YouTube. I suspect these teaching unions have probably found those interviews and are following them. But thank you, Crusader General. Mary with $3. Thank you very much, Mary. And to PC as well, who says they have weak brains, Michael. That's why. And I think that can apply to any of the points we made across the episode. I think weak brains certainly, or weak thinking for sure. Christian Klein says Michael Kaufman tells it all today. Kudos for such moral clarity. Absolutely. The enemy within is very real and it must be fought. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do in the course of what we raise on this show. But Daniel, let me come to you.
Yeah, I think it's first of all, it's brave of you to talk about, you know, a nation taking over without firing a single bullet. When I asked you to watch a movie on Christmas and you recommended the communist propaganda, so I won't take your advice on that.
Yeah, I want to say which movie it was, just so we don't feed anyone.
So the movie was It's a Wonderful Life, which is clearly a communist propaganda, or that's. I would have to go too long to explain it, but basically, I think that's originally, if I'm not mistaken, what Ayn Rand sort of said when she was brought up in front of the House on Un-American Affairs, and she was talking about how basically Hollywood through movies, through this sort of like nice feeling movies, not necessarily having a political message, can sort of inspire or sort of put through sort of communist propaganda. If you just Google House on American Affairs, Un-American Affairs with Ayn Rand, you should be able to find more about that. Oh, now I have no idea.
Oh, that sounds like a Christmas episode in the making, anyway, doesn't it? We'll have to do something covering that sort of thing when it comes nearer the time, because there are elements within it that you can pull out that are that are life affirming, perhaps, even if they're, you know, obviously not the communist elements. But yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So something I just quickly wanted to mention about sort of like people advocating for ideas without having no idea what those ideas will actually bring in the reality. And it's really hard, and I've been saying this for a long time, it's really hard for especially Americans who not only probably all their life have been living in a Western liberal like a country, but also have a culture of that. Basically, the American idea or the idea of being American, the American sense of life, basically didn't have anything else. The whole existence of America has been this sort of Western style of government, which I think is a good in one way, that it's sort of the amount of optimism, the positive outlook of life is very unique to America. But also there is a certain amount of naivete that I think sort of some people will lead through here. And it's my favorite example to sort of like just to imagine or just to give you an idea what it's like to sort of live in a communist country is, you know, I grew up in the 2000s, more than basically almost 15 years after the communism fell in Czechoslovakia. And something that I grew up with is the idea that tangerine is a Christmas fruit. And someone might be thinking, why is tangerine a Christmas fruit? It's because, and this spirit of it still stayed in Slovakia despite no longer living under communism. It's because fruits were giving out only on Christmas, or certain luxuries like tangerines were only given on some days. You had to wait whole day for them, and you could only get them because, you know, there were no supply chains. It was, it was crazy. So, you know, that's what it really means, like advocating for these ideas. Something like tangerine is a luxury. And I think it's really hard for sort of just people in America to make sort of to abstractly realize or imagine what it's like to live under communism. But I think like
I agree with you. I don't know that you even have to get that desperate or that bad to understand. I think America has had a major failing that has led to a lot of this, or at least underlies it, since 9/11, 2001. Now, a lot of these idiots were born that we're seeing on college campuses with all their knowledge and all their understanding of the world, which they profess. They weren't alive at that time. But what the school system, and I honestly believe that the public, and to some extent, probably a slightly lesser extent, the private school system in America is almost completely to blame, as well as the parents who've allowed it to perpetuate. And I know we fought it in our family. The kids would come home with some very misguided notions, and we would hand them, to be frank, we handed Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead out as part of it. But we certainly had discussions at dinner to say, let's assume your ideas are right. Let's bring them to their extent. But my point is that 2001, we absolutely did not handle in America the underlying philosophy of what happened. And all we worried about was Islamophobia. There was a lot more concern a year after 9/11 about these poor Muslims being misunderstood than there was teaching people that there is a militaristic Islamic cult that exists in our world. Call it Al-Qaeda, call it ISIS, call it ISIL, call it whatever you want to, that is bent on destruction of the West. We didn't say that. We didn't, even some of the most warmongering presidents like Bush, with Cheney and Rumsfeld and so on. Yeah, they wanted to go blow people up, but they didn't have the moral clarity or the philosophical clarity to go in and say there are a group of people that want to annihilate the West. And they want to keep annihilating the West, and they are going to keep doing it. And yes, they're all Islamic. They're all Islamic, and they have a very strict interpretation of Islam. And it's going to be them or us, because they have made the rules. And we blew it in America. We pretended this was just about Afghanistan, which it wasn't. And we've since managed to lose Afghanistan after trillions of dollars were spent there. And we then invaded Iraq, which was just because George Bush #2 had a thing for Iraq because George Bush #1 didn't succeed. Instead of going after the head of the tiger here, which was Iran, and instead of calling Saudi Arabia to task, even if you had to do it privately. I mean, it's not that, I'm not a historian, but I lived through this. And you saw in America that we don't teach kids 9/11 because it might offend some Muslims. I've said this on the show before. We don't teach World War II properly. We don't teach the Holocaust much. I think 30% of schools teach the Holocaust, 30%. The other 70% say it's too hard on German students. Now, I would venture to guess that a lot of schools teach what's going on, at least part of what's going on in Palestine and Israel. My point is that we have had opportunities in America to explain to people that even though you can go and get fruit anytime you want, and you can get 17,000 different kinds of fruit, and it can all be within a few days because we don't keep it much longer in the US, because otherwise it won't pass inspection. And you can get anything you want here all the time. And supply chains are amazing here. And that we could teach them that requires civilization that we don't have in the Middle East, except in Israel. But we don't. So I don't know that, frankly, we have had it very easy here and always relied on our amazing military while complaining about how much we spend on the military. We always absolutely depend on them. But we had an opportunity philosophically to nail things here, and we didn't. And we still don't. And this is one reason why terrorism has become a popular thing for students to talk about, because we never got up there and said that there's only one answer to terrorism, and that is to annihilate them. They are not just Westerners who have a reasonable gripe. They want to destroy civilization. We have never said that.
Absolutely. You're totally right. It's only when you start, labeling what's the evil, what's the enemy, that you can only start thinking about even planning to defeat it. Otherwise, you're just grasping the dark and not knowing what to do. And that's part of the great epidemic of mental health comes from the contradiction that people are forced to carry in their minds. They are told something, while they know perfectly well that it's not correct. They know that a man and a woman, what they are. You learn it, at the age of 3. A 5-year-old can give you an explanation of the issue if you struggle with it. But an adult is supposed to think that what he knows is not valid, and therefore, holding this kind of irrationality in your head, it's got to screw up with your conceptual faculty. That's why so many people are feeling fear, because what they thought was true is suddenly being declared false by a bunch of people who have the monopoly over the megaphone. And that's part of the issue. And they're too afraid to say, well, hang on a second, I know exactly what a man is. I know exactly that the Palestinians don't exist. I know exactly that Israel is under constant attack by these people whom are supposed to feel sorry about. But they haven't got the confidence to stand up to it and say. And that's why they find themselves in a situation where they don't know what to do. They're forced to take orders from the mothership and take this movement, this protest, this irrational stuff that we are tolerating on the streets. They are funded by somebody. And who would have interest in funding things like this? Who is it that hates Jews more than they love their own people? Let me think. Could it be Iran? I don't know. Just,
I think that's true, but I also think there's a good number of people who are lifetime subscribers to this ideology without any paraphernalia or propaganda from anyone else. That's what they actually think, isn't it? And one of the things you notice in these kind of meetings is how the baton is passed from one generation to another. As each teacher teaches the next batch of teachers how to use activism and talks about their previous experience, whatever their cause was 20 years ago or longer ago. One of those speaking at this particular conference was talking about 2006, particularly significant time within the course of Israel's history. And he's talking about the difficulties he had, or the hot water he potentially got into when they were trying to get the BDS movement off the ground in 2006. Now, why on earth would you be getting a BDS movement off the ground in 2006 at the very point when Israel is disengaging from Gaza and supposedly the Palestinians have got the opportunity to run their own affairs? So and yet you're keen to focus on punishing Israel economically, which is actually your motivation in the first place anyway. I think a lot of the techniques you see, propagated through this kind of stuff seems not much different from grooming techniques in terms of the ways they're trying to use it. There's a fear of speaking out among students who think differently or hold independent opinions. There's the fact that they're always, trying to use the emotional technique to use these tender minds at a delicate age. When they're trying to get, used to their own form of thinking, they're using emotion and compassion as tools of cognition. They're saying, look at these, Palestinian people who are suffering. You should blame who they blame. Rather than thinking, what is the cause of their suffering really? It's not necessarily what the Palestinian themselves is saying is the problem. It's the bigger picture of who do the Palestinians support in terms of Hamas and their own government and the ideology behind it. And that's what's led to the suffering. But of course, it starts at the emotion, and it kind of stops at the emotion as long as they've got the answer that the teacher and the union wants them to have, which is to be anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic in the first place.
And of course, this activity that these so-called teachers are actually carrying out are actively harming kids who are mistreated at school, or they feel they don't belong. We've seen the campuses, students try to cross the campus being attacked. I mean, what the hell?
I just wanted to thank Walter Bishak for your super chat. Thank you very much, Walter. We appreciate it. Daniel.
Well, I would probably, just sort of wrap up with my last sentence, because you earlier mentioned that, Iran is trying to destroy us. But the fact is, we are doing a pretty good job at destroying ourselves too. So I would just finish with a quote from George W. Bush. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and so are we.
Never a truer word spoken by an idiot, but yeah.
When can people find more about you, Daniel?
On my YouTube channel, Damn Dan. The link is going to be in the description.
Michael?
Yeah, real quick, not to be outdone by Dana, great quote. But it's worth, after this talk today, reading the scene where John Galt in Atlas Shrugged, where John Galt is at the meeting of the company he originally belonged to, and they decided to institute communism, basically, from each according to his ability, to each according to their need. Of course, decided upon by a group of bosses, who, even though it's all communism. It's the same thing. It's the rot from within. It's the agreement, the tacit agreement or the active agreement of people that are idiots who don't think and don't want to understand. It's been around for a long time. It's been documented, and it's here again, unfortunately. Michael Kaufman, 2Fs, LinkedIn.
Brilliant. And thank you also for the plug for Atlas Shrugged, which everybody should read if they really want to understand why the world is in the state it's in. Daniel, is there anything coming up that we should be flagging up?
There should be another video of Leonard Peikoff answers. It should be in an hour, but we've had some difficulties, so it might take a little bit longer today. But hopefully, it will be it will still be out just not too long after. And
that's
so
for members.
Yeah, that's for members. So if you are a YouTube member, you'll get a notification about both that the video is live, and also there's going to be a post. And if you are a website member, you're going to get an email. So you should be notified as soon as possible either way.
Cool. Brilliant.
And also check out the Briefly Objective short content for you to share and like and comment, whatever.
And the link to the particular article by the Free Press will be attached to this video as well if you want to look into the detail of that. So please do that as well. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you to our super chatters. And we'll be back tomorrow on this channel for the Daily Objective and the reality show tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.